I'm Shane Thomas, and this is Analysing Doctor Who. I'm joined by Emma Foster and Chris Colker, and we are here to analyse Lucky Day. And if you have any thoughts on our upcoming thoughts or anything else Doctor Who based, you can email us at analysingdoctorwho@gmail.com. So if we just start the episode rating out of 10, please, Emma, for this.
I'm going to give it a 9.
Chris, your rating?
I went with 8.
Okay, I'm giving it a 6. I think I'm in the minority. I mean, we'll get into this, but it does seem that I'm hugely in the minority on this. Chris, if we come to your favourite part of the episode.
How Conrad doesn't have like a sudden change of heart in the final confrontation when the real Shriek shows up at unit headquarters. They very easily could have like shifted his thinking and been like, oh, well, suddenly now I get what this is all about. I mean, they kind of planted a few seeds earlier with that when you see, that his mother was abusive. It would be very easy to give him the character moment where he's like, okay, I relent. I realize I was wrong. But the thing is, the fact that he doesn't do that is really consistent with the kind of people we see every day online who don't change their minds, even when they have cold hard facts that are presented to them. It really is an episode about how people kind of build their own realities today, I think. And some of those realities are very far from our own. And it would be laughable if it wasn't so scary how far from reality they are.
There's no doubt that that's a big concern of, I think, of Russell's in particular. I assume Pete McTighe as well. He's the credited writer for this episode. There are aspects, I thought, of the earlier parts of the giggle. So before the Doctor realises the Toymaker, they just know that the world seems to have come undone and everyone's doing what they want and no one's listening to reason. It's that great scene where
hello?
Hello?
How are you?
Fine.
Busy day?
Why do you want to know?
I'm just asking. Is that a problem?
It's an invasion of my privacy. In fact, it's an assault on my civic rights, and I think it's highly relevant that the person demanding information from me is an alien.
This does feel like a continuation of that, and Tennant's Doctor 14 does have that speech himself about the worst parts of humanity. You can't reason with people who are just determined to be unreasonable.
To me, it feels like if Clive from Rose or if the Linda people from Love and Monsters were like evil.
Oh, and 100%. There's definitely the early parts of this episode felt very similar to like Love and Monsters. That was something I thought of immediately. Yeah, I think Russell and his team are trying to comment on some of these issues that you're saying in terms of how people seem to react, particularly in an online sphere, and how the earlier Doctor Who and his early Doctor Who wouldn't have been like this. And I don't want to put words in your mouth, but I imagine that's part of why you like that. I did like that bit as well, but why you like that so much was because, no, I'm not into Doctor Who, but in TV we're so used to seeing someone see the light once they're presented with enough evidence. There's nothing that can convince this guy.
Right. Yeah. I mean, even when he meets a real Shriek, like at the end, of that particular confrontation, he's like, well, your special effects have really gotten a lot better. Like he still doesn't quite believe it because he's live casting to the world and that's what he wants to present to the world. But we can talk about that whole part later. I know you have that on the agenda for later in the episode.
Yeah, that's right. Emma, if we come to your favorite part from this.
I think my favourite scene of this was the ending confrontation in the TARDIS.
You see, I am fighting a battle on behalf of everyday people who just want to get through their day and feel safe and warm and fed. And then along comes this noise all day long, this relentless noise. Cowards like you, weaponizing lies, taking people's insecurity and fear and making it currency. You are exhausting. You stamp on the truth, choke our bandwidth and shred our patience, because the only strategy you have is to wear us down. But the thing is, Conrad, I have energy to burn and all the time in the universe.
I think
A lot
because...
of people, just to add, a lot of people have said this as well.
Yeah. I feel like it was sort of it was quite cathartic, I think, for a lot of people, because I was like, yes, bitch, say it. This is what we're all thinking. You know what I mean? Like, I think as well, in terms of like Ncuti's doctor, it was a bit, I think a lot of people were like, oh, finally, like, you know, seeing the thing of like, he didn't cry, there's no screaming, like he's not losing his temper. I think a lot of people wanted to see that thing of the doctor where he just gets, you know, that he's fucking foaming. Matt Smith was really good at that, doing that sort of cold, angry doctor. But it was really good to see him like go and do that part of the doctor's persona, which we haven't really seen so far from Ncuti. And it was brilliantly acted from both of them. Finally, seeing that aspect of Ncuti's doctor sort of flex their muscles and saying what I think a lot of people feel it, especially that bit when he says, you are exhausting. And I was like, yes, yes. Aren't we all just so damn tired of this, all of this? And yeah, just saying what I think a lot of people are thinking.
I totally agree about the catharsis, I think, is what seems to have resonated with an awful lot of people.
Like, I think that twist is really perfectly paced as well, that it's 20 minutes in. And I remember sort of, because I was watching it, I don't usually do this, I usually watch this at home, but I was actually out and about yesterday, like I was super busy. So I was watching it on my phone on the train, right? And I sort of remember sort of getting to that bit just before the twist happens. I remember sort of just tapping on it, see how far we're into the episode we're in. And I remember thinking, bloody hell, this has got to do something soon. Otherwise, we're going to be talking about a right clanger here. And then that twist happens. And as I said to you, Shane, you know, I nearly screeched in front of a lot of Norwich supporters on the train down on the train yesterday. It was really beautifully paced as well, which is something that I think we're always talking about with RTD, well, not RTD2. That it always seems to feel like we haven't got enough time or things are rushed or things like that. But I just felt like this one absolutely nailed it right on the beats where it needed to happen. I think for the first time for a long time, I wasn't sitting there thinking, oh, I just wish I had like another 2 minutes here, or I wanted less of Act 2 and more of Act 3. So, yeah.
But I think with that scene, I imagine if we did like a straw poll of Doctor Who fans, and like you can never get a group of Doctor Who fans to agree about anything, but
no,
if we did, I think this, you know, this was Family Fortunes or Family Feud for Americans, that this would be Survey Says top answer, that scene.
Yeah,
right.
It was close for me, that the sort of the twist scene. Because, I mean, I knew, I sort of deeply felt that Conrad was sort of sketchy, but I couldn't quite put my finger on what it was how it was going to turn out. Like, but I definitely didn't envisage it was going to be to the degree that the twist happens, if you see what I mean. My
initial guess was that as we were watching it, that he didn't take the antidote only because he wanted to meet the doctor himself.
Yeah.
He kind of had that fanboy thing that Elton had in Love and Monsters, or, you know, Clive or whatever, that he kind of like wanted to meet the guy, and he knew that Ruby was like his connection. And that's why he was sticking close to her and, you know, romancing her, because he knew that if he hung around long enough, the doctor was likely to show up. To be fair, that is kind of what happened, except it took a much darker twist to the whole thing. But that is kind of how it worked.
Yeah, I mean, because I was making notes as I was going, and I was like, oh, this dude is like the anti-Elton from Love and Monsters. I mean, we brought it up. So it's so interesting that to play with that idea, that I think that watching Doctor Who as basically the whole history of its show nearly up until this point, that virtually everyone who meets the Doctor is inspired by that meeting. Almost no matter what happens to the people that he comes across. Some people obviously don't jive with the Doctor. He's left some people better than when he arrived. So, but it's so interesting to do this thing of like, obviously you have that example of like Elton literally met the Doctor for seconds as a child. His mum died, but it's almost that thing of like, it kind of not doesn't matter, but he was inspired by that meeting, and he, you know, was a good person, and, you know, it brought in friendship and companionship and all this sort of thing. And the events of Love and Monsters are obviously sort of closely related to this, in that, you know, he's manipulated to doing unpleasant things because of his perceived connection to the Doctor. He sort of gaslights Jackie along the way to get to Rose. So that's not dissimilar to Conrad. But like you saying with Elton, he's fundamentally a good guy. He's just misguided for the duration of that show, and inspired to be that way, arguably because of that extremely brief brush by the Doctor. Whereas with Conrad, he takes the kind of opposite turn of that brush by the Doctor, and then he turns into bitterness because of his upbringing, you know, his history. And it's so interesting to explore that idea, because I really think that is basically an untouched idea almost in Doctor Who. Virtually like 99% of everyone who's ever met the Doctor is inspired by him. Every companion has gone on to do incredible things, but then you have the very sort of niche idea almost that's not going to happen to everybody.
I mean, it definitely is, as you said, a very untouched area in the show that we ended up with that kind of reaction to meeting the Doctor for sure. I mean, Clive kind of has a reverence in a way, like he knows in Rose that like death follows the Doctor and, you know, he can be dangerous, but like he also has a sort of awe about him, you know, like he thinks the Doctor ultimately is a good force, I think. But, you know, obviously Conrad does not agree.
Yeah, I suppose as well, you could talk about Tegan. I mean, because obviously she leaves under a cloud because, as she says, it's not fun anymore, you know, with Adric dying. And she obviously has extraordinarily complicated feelings about her time with the Doctor. But ultimately, she sticks on the side of helping humanity, working for UNIT, still wants to talk to the Doctor, if you see what I mean. She doesn't go down that full route of like chaotic evil kind of idea, if you see what I mean. So that's the closest we've tiptoed up to, but we've never really gone full off the edge like we have with Lucky Day.
So my favourite part actually was the brief, I guess, time that we get with the Sundays in the family. I really enjoyed. Ruby's biological mum, and I'm blanking on her name now.
Louise.
Louise, thank you. She's been incorporated into the family group now, and there is a very natural. I often have liked those scenes when we've seen them starting with the Church of Ruby Road. They just ring very true. They resonate very well. It's very much that down-to-earth kitchen sink style of writing that sometimes we associate with stuff that Russell T Davies is associated with. It's just a lot of fun being in their company. I think it's because maybe there's things I recognise in them, in real people that I know. And Angela Winter, who plays Cherry, the Nan, I think she just remains a scene-stealing delight.
I love her. I love her. I was about her watching The Wicker Man. So she should. Yeah. That sort of thing. That's so funny.
Well, what I love about that scene, I think that's one of the things that why I put this over the top. My favourite part is that it's a funny line. It's a really good line with a lovely bit of almost like English type whimsy. But just hidden in that is a really, really serious point that in terms of Cherry's characterisation that you get. Because when he says, I've been to English villages, remember how old she is, how long she's probably been in England, what her experience coming to England from Jamaica would be. So there is a serious point about race, because she'd be part of probably the Windrush generation, or maybe slightly younger. So when she says that, there is a serious point she's making there, and also that natural nature of your nan being overprotective of you anyway whenever you leave the house. So you have so much recognisable about that in the real world, with a serious point, but it's also done in such a humorous way that it's actually really entertaining. It doesn't feel like they're trying to ham you over the head with anything. The way that she looks up Conrad on Insta. Yeah,
there's one with his shirt off. I like that. Yeah, really good.
But she even how Una spell him name, and it's just so they've stuck with the Jamaican patois, which I'm glad they've done that. We didn't get a lot, but what we got, those were like, oh yeah, I understand why we can't have more of this. The episode can only be so long. But any time we were there was when I felt most engaged, when everything seemed to flow really well. I'll get into why I didn't think other stuff didn't later. It's the performances. All the performances are really good. And these actors seem to work really well together. And they've done this a little while now, so I'm sure there's an easy chemistry between them. Anytime we had with them was great. And it's a pity we didn't get this. I'm not blaming anyone. I get, again, episode can only be 45 minutes, but there is a deleted scene where Conrad does meet the family. I imagine this is probably before the how many dates is it now, and it's 6. So he would have met the family, and I'm sure he charmed them and everything at that point. I really would have loved to have seen that scene. That would have been a lot of fun. And when I think of what I enjoyed, just as a pleasurable experience, this I got the most pleasure from. Anytime we had the Sundays, and hopefully we'll see them again. Definitely, hopefully we'll see Cherry again. So Emma, if we come to what was your least favourite part from this?
I think because it annoyed me. I think really just obviously the sort of the subject matter of it as well, because I think that there's a certain part of me that's like, yeah, I know Doctor Who is obviously here to make points and to hold a mirror up to society. But I was watching this and I thought, bloody hell, this is a bit heavy, isn't it? For 8 o'clock in the morning. So I think it was a little bit the subject matter. I think because in my mind, what this episode was, and from the trailers, obviously they couldn't show the twist and all that. But I think I sort of had it in my mind this was going to be sort of a goofy kind of Scooby-Doo kind of silly Ruby and her doofy boyfriend.
Dr. Light as well.
Dr. Light, yeah. So I was a bit like, this is sort of what it is. And obviously for the first 20 minutes, that's what I was delivered. And I was all in my mind, like thinking about what I was going to say to you. And then obviously that it switched. As much as I obviously gave it a 9 and I enjoyed this episode, it just felt a little bit like, but that was just purely just the mindset I was in and not expecting it. So, but I struggled to actually think of a legitimate criticism because that's not a legitimate criticism.
That's fair, but you have to say something. And I see what you're saying. Like this, I didn't hate Dot and Bubble, but I found something similar with Dot and Bubble, where it does everything fine, but I detested Lindy even before we realised everything about her. I just didn't. I didn't enjoy watching her, and I know you're not meant to enjoy watching her. But as a piece of entertainment, it was artistic but not entertaining, for one of a better
it's one of those things of like, it's a bit like, I mean, obviously I'm not comparing these two things because this is such an apples and oranges argument, but like films like Schindler's List, I know it's important to see it. I know it's extraordinarily well acted. I know it looks incredible cinematography, but I never want to see it again.
Yeah.
You know, I'm not going to sit down and think, oh, you know, I've got a loose end and Sunday evening. I know, pop Schindler's List on, sod that.
Yeah.
I'm not here to cry today.
Yeah, Schindler's List, 12 Years a Slave, Grave of the Fireflies, you only need to watch them once.
Exactly. Like I say, give it a 9, but I can't envisage the next time I'm going to be like, oh yeah, pop Lucky Day on.
Chris, what was your least favourite part?
We kind of touched on this a little bit, but and I understand why from a storytelling point of view, but why another Dr. Light episode? You kind of get the feeling that this is setting up the unit spinoff, the war between the land and the sea. But we've already had 2 other Dr. Light episodes last season because Ncuti was needed on sex education. But I mean, if he leaves at the end of the season, which is some of the rumors are going around, he'll only have 18 full episodes, and there's going to be 3 of them that he was barely in. I'm just trying to think of the math here. Like, he's going to have a really, really short run of stories where you actually see him in the center of the story. And again, I understand why from a storytelling point of view, why that was needed, but it just felt like not a wasted opportunity, but just kind of another chance that we could have seen more of his Doctor. I mean, the end scene kind of makes up for it a lot because as you were talking about, we finally see some of the intensity that we got from some of the other Doctors. But I feel like I just wanted to see a little more of him in the episode.
Yeah, I mean, just for full disclosure for those who don't know, Ncuti wasn't obviously being indolent. He was filming the robot with, again, him and Varda Setu. They were filming the Robot Revolution at the same time in a different studio. So to me, maybe they all saw each other at lunchtime and stuff. Maybe. They were in the same building. Yeah, he was filming the Robot Revolution while Lucky Day was being filmed.
That Shane, I didn't realize, but I understand why you might have needed a Dr. Light episode in a season that used to be 13 episodes. But why do you still need a Dr. Light episode when you only have 8 episodes? I'm no TV production expert, but it would seem like with fewer episodes, you'd be able to have all of them with the Doctor in them.
Yeah, I mean, the one thing we don't know, and maybe we'll find out at some point in the future, is in terms of the scheduling, what was the scheduling like? Well, we only have Ncuti. I don't know. This is pure speculation on my part. I could be totally wrong. Did he have him for a limited amount of days? And they said, well, we can save some days. If we save on this, we can do something else. Whether it's in terms of budget, whether it's in terms of schedule, whether it's in terms of story. Is it literally just a case of, to tell this story the way you tell it, you can't have the Doctor show up until much later?
I watched the Unleashed, and I watched the little 10-minute other Unleashed, sort of other bit of behind the scenes stuff that's on YouTube just now. And right at the beginning of the YouTube chunk, Russell says this is something we always had planned. So I think maybe it was a case of like they wanted like a Ruby Sunday centric episode exploring these ideas of sort of what happens to companions sort of post Doctor, and said, okay, well, we've got this one that's heavily Ruby, so let's, divide up the blocks so that we're shooting these simultaneously so we can get ahead of it. So I think it was a case of like the story led the way the production worked, if you see what I mean. That's the way Russell makes it sound anyway.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, obviously we don't know if that is the case, and you want to focus on, which the episode does a bit, focus on Ruby, the what is life like the companion when the Doctor's not around. It is true you then can't have the Doctor in much of the episode. You can't have Ruby talking about how she feels without the Doctor if the Doctor's right next to her.
I did see some comments online where people were like, well, the Doctor should have showed up and like give her a big hug while she's going through this crisis or whatever. And I'm like, but that's not really the point of the story. Point of the story is, as you were just saying, is how do they cope when the Doctor's not around? Not just Ruby, but also Unit and everybody else. How do they figure stuff out on their own? And story-wise, I get it. But, just in terms of being able to get the maximum amount of the Doctor that you can get, I just don't know that makes the most amount of sense. If you're just coming into the show, if last season or this season is like your first season, you're probably wondering, why is the Doctor not even in this episode? I mean, the show's called Doctor Who. Like, we get it because we've been watching for a while, but are other people going to be like, where's the Doctor in this show? Like, they might be confused about why he's only in like 5 minutes of his own show.
Obviously, you have to say something. I think if this is your thing you like the least, it kind of sums up why you've given this the rating that you have. I mean, I think this came up in another recording we did for this series earlier. Is the one thing I have sympathy with the writers. I don't think they can write episodes as if every episode is someone's first episode. But the writers can't really write like that, apart from maybe the first episode of a series, just simply because if you do that, then there's a lot you can never do in a Doctor Who episode.
Oh, sure.
Because you're always writing for, well, what's the person think for the first time going to think? And then you are limiting what a Doctor Who episode can be. And one of the great things about the show and why it's lasted so long is that each episode can be something different and can be anything.
And I agree with that. I just meant like if your first episode was like the Robot Revolution and you're only on episode 4 now, and you're like, well, how come the Doctor's not even in like the 4th episode of the season? Like, it might be confusing. And it might also be intriguing. And it might lead you to explore past seasons and read more into why he wasn't in the episode very much and all that stuff. And that might suck you in. I don't know. I mean, I agree not every episode can be written as this is your first episode. But hopefully, if this is your first episode of Doctor Who, you're still intrigued enough to continue on or go back and watch previous episodes and previous seasons, or go online and search around and try to understand more about it. But I mean, certainly the messaging of this episode in particular, I think would be enough if you were just happened to be surfing into Doctor Who, or you had a friend sit down and watch it with you. I think the messaging would be enough to drive you to find out more about the show, presuming that you agree with the messaging, which if you don't, you're probably not watching the show anyway, but you might be.
So my least favorite part of this is a specific bit. It's not the reason why I gave it a 6, but I definitely didn't like this at all. Once we have the twist, Conrad, we get a montage of such, and Conrad appears on the One Show. That will probably mean very little to people outside the UK, but I saw that and that immediately, that jarred with me so much, because that's just not happening.
Although obviously he's like this thing of him being handsome or whatever, and like kids are talking about him, like his views are way too out there for the One Show.
Yeah, the One Show is basically, for those who don't know, it's a show that appears weekly on BBC One at 7 p.m. So once basically the news is done.
No, it's every day. It's not weekly.
Oh, sorry, my bad. I meant every weekday, but I explained it horribly. Sorry. Thank you for the correction, Emma. Yes, every weekday. I mean, every week on BBC One, and it's very much kind of a lifestyle show. So there is some very kind of light news and into like Doctor Ncuti's been on there past couple of years promoting the show. Like Doctor Who will promote itself on there sometimes. You know, Hollywood celebs go on there, like the Severance lot. The Severance lot were on there and stuff. But sometimes there's stuff about like, I don't know, companies that charge for electricity and they're charging rip-off prices. Yeah, so it's sort of a thing of like it's a light entertainment mixed with consumer affairs. So you have stuff like that. Then there'll be an article about like people playing tiddlywinks. And then there'll be a thing about, you know, don't let your granny get scammed by someone knocking on their door trying to get them to change your energy provider. That's about as heavy as it gets for the One Show. Yeah, and they do kind of, when they go between subjects, the transitions can be almost consciously, almost deliberately awkward, to the point. There's a great clip of Mel Brooks. I don't know what he's promoting. Maybe it was like a re-release of the producer. So Mel Brooks is on the show,
Earlier on, we heard the story of Patricia, who contacted us, hoping to find out more about her long-lost father.
What a crazy show.
I know.
We are the classic.
Now we're fine, Patricia.
This is kind of like the sponsors break. They have to do something serious, and they'll be back to the frivolity of us shortly.
We're serious. We just turn the page and we move on.
Right, let's focus on Patricia now, all right?
Yes.
Okay.
Right,
This is nuts. I want to...
It is the most like milquetoast mainstream down the middle show maybe there is on UK television. They are not having someone like Conrad on. They wouldn't have someone whose views are conspiratorial. They wouldn't have someone from the far right on. They wouldn't have someone from the far left on. It doesn't matter if they're a big story. The One Show deliberately tries to avoid controversy. It tries to be very straight down the middle and inoffensive as possible. So it avoids controversy. And Conrad, if nothing else, is an incredibly controversial person and a controversial character. So the idea of him on the One Show is bullshit. It's just straight bullshit.
I could see him being on Loose Women. They could have him on. Like,
Maybe,
because they,
yeah.
maybe. I mean, again, this is a little bit UK centric. Sorry.
Yeah, Loose Women is basically The View.
The View, yeah. I mean, really, what they would have him on is something like GB News, which is
Yes, 100%.
sort of like the sort of the one step beyond Fox News kind of fringe 24-hour news channel, which is very sort of very right wing. But they can't obviously use that on a BBC show. They're trying to use the shorthand of putting him on the One Show of making his say like, hey, his views are sort of moving beyond sort of Instagram and Discord servers and sort of TikTok, and it's ending up trickling into the mainstream. Because I think, sort of forget being chronically online, there's an enormous portion of the population who like don't know who Andrew Tate is, even though everyone online does, because you can't escape the asshole. But it's that thing of like they're trying to give you a visual shorthand of saying, hey, his views are sort of being beamed to like everyone in the UK, and that's the way to do it. Unless you literally, because they wouldn't want him on like they wouldn't have him on BBC News like the Good Morning shows and all that sort of thing. So the One Show is like the one thing they've got they can put him on, because they couldn't do like the Roger Grilliam thing and put him on Newsnight. Like they would never even entertain someone like him on Newsnight.
See, I actually disagree. I think they might.
You think they'd have him on Newsnight?
Not necessarily in the studio, but like when they cut to
or like calling in or something. Yeah,
or like a pre-recorded interview.
Yeah, yeah, maybe.
Like
perhaps that would have been a better option.
Again, I'm not saying that's likely, but that would have been more credible. Like I could have seen being on one, like the BBC News podcasts on BBC Sounds.
Yeah, like on BBC Sounds or something. Maybe, yeah.
What's her name? Koonsberg or another Scottish guy. I don't know. Yeah, I know. That's why I should definitely have him on, because that would get her great ratings. I could imagine him on one of those potential podcasts on BBC Sound. So I could imagine you cut to that, maybe even Newsnight, because they used the way they had Amal Rajan, who I don't think even does Newsnight, but like he has a kind of a news podcast on BBC Sounds, which they sometimes then use the video of BBC iPlayer, his recent interview with Gary Lineker, for example. That I could imagine. And like he's being challenged, but not really. You're actually just letting him spout his bile, which is what happens on this clip on the One Show. That I can imagine. It just wouldn't happen on the One Show. And my best reason for why they did this is maybe they couldn't get anyone from the news division to do it.
I'm sure that the BBC standards people were like, if we put him on like even fictionally on a news channel, we're gonna lend legitimacy to this thing of like, because with the Roger William thing, it's like he is the Prime Minister or he is the candidate, be like a candidate for it.
Yeah, he's an elected politician.
He's an elected politician. Yeah, he's an MP or whatever. So you can say, well, there's a reason why he would be on there. But I think that I know it's sort of like a big logical leap and it sort of doesn't make sense. But I'm sure the lawyers were like, if we have on the news channel one of these bloody internet assholes, then it's going to be a thing of like, does that open the door to doing it in real life?
I don't think that's a leap at all. I think you may be right. I think that's the best explanation.
That thing of like, we're trying to give it the shorthand of like, this guy is going mainstream. And if we're not going to have him on any of the news channels and we don't want to do news like we did that last season, where can we really put him? You're only really left with the One Show, because he's not going to be on Homes Under the Hammer.
No.
You know what I mean?
Yeah, I wouldn't expect him. That's the best guess, because even though you think, well, it's just the BBC, like what's all the BBC, what's the problem? As David Mitchell, the comedian and actor, said before, it is actually very tough among the different divisions to get cooperation. Apparently it's a lot tougher than you think. So the idea of, we're a BBC show, the BBC News division will help us out. Sometimes they do say, no, fuck off, do one. So maybe that's it by some kind of process of elimination. But when that came up, I was like, my interior monologue was like, no, fuck off. No, he's not going to he's just not getting on at One Show.
Like, it startled me when I saw him when they went with that. Like, if they do a thing of like they just have him going live on Insta or TikTok, like it would be like it's just like a youth movement. They've got to get that shorthand of like everyone in the UK now knows about this bloke.
Yeah, maybe they should have got him like some fake mock-ups of newspapers and got him on the front page.
Yeah, something like that.
Because I definitely understand the reason of trying to show that this guy's having some impact. And you see the montage and you see people reacting online, and I'm like, okay, this isn't a ridiculous stretch. And just that bit on the one show was just like, it just took me so much out of the sequence. It felt a little bit, and maybe because the show's back on Netflix in the UK, like those montages from years and years when you're seeing things falling apart bit by bit. But it's felt like a less efficient version of that. Like, it felt like actually it took some of the scraps, this whole episode, like it took some of the scraps almost of like bits of years and years and the gigglers I've mentioned, and even 73 yards, and tried to mesh them all together, which was part of the issue of this episode. Is like, you're trying to, this is slightly felt like a version of things you've done before and you've done better than this. But if we transition actually quite easily now, Chris, into talk of Conrad, the notion of conspiracy theories and the social message that this episode is trying to paint.
You know, it's not just about conspiracy theories. I mean, Pete McKay seems to be writing about, you know, the willful spread of disinformation, whether it's for power, whether it's just to be chaotic, to sow chaos. It's not always 100% clear whether Conrad actually believes what he's saying, or is he doing it for clicks and views? Has he been spewing the bullshit so long that even he buys into it now? Or, as we mentioned earlier, is he just dead set against saying he's wrong, that he's just going to keep going with it and hope that he can push his way through? It's interesting. I mean, it reminded me of, especially when he starts talking about everybody being actors in the unit confrontation at the end, you know, of the infamous Alex Jones, who is the, you know, American podcaster who claimed that American school shootings were all crisis actors and they're all false flag operations. It's also political propaganda like Fox News in America that just continues to just lie, even in the face of obvious facts. I'm sure the UK and other countries have whatever their equivalents are, but that's what it reminded me about as an American.
And if I come to you on the same topic,
I agree with Chris. It was that thing of like, when I was a kid, conspiracy theories were fun. It was like aliens built the pyramids and the queen is actually secretly a lizard, you know, all those sort of things. Of course, there are true believers to all these things. There still are. But that thing that suddenly it seemed to happen almost, sure, it didn't happen overnight. Like you say, I think Alex Jones is the real instigator of like the kind of not mainstream, but still underground, but like enough people knew about him that you could make a living saying that tap water's turning the frogs gay and appearing to believe it. Again, I think that it's really interesting, that thing of like with what you read online and some of the, you know, the grifters, you know, Andrew Tate is the one that pops straight into my mind when you look at Conrad Clark, is that he cannot possibly believe what he's talking about. And this is all a gigantic grift. Because, I mean, they pretty much say so in the episode that Conrad's doing all right out of this line of conspiracy theory. And there's people online saying, how could he possibly say that this is actors and special effects when he watched the TARDIS dematerialize? I mean, the fact that trolling and rage bait is near indistinguishable from real now, and that people basically do these things to make money, to grift, to get by in this world. It makes life so confusing. The fact that the episode does not give you any clear answers about that. And I think you can read Conrad Clark's character in both ways very easily. I think is just reflective of real life.
Some interesting things I noted, and this was almost my favourite part. The scene when Ruby explains to Conrad, when they're quote unquote dating, and Ruby explains to Conrad what the shriek is, and then the whole in the cafe, and the cafe gradually goes dark. And it's just those two, and it feels like a shriek is sneaking up behind Conrad. And it feels Ruby's actually gone to a quite sinister place in terms of a line reading. It's a tremendous line reading. I really actually like how this scene was put together, because what this scene is, obviously it's not really happening. This is Conrad's own interior feelings in that moment. He's actually terrified. Ruby mentions that the shriek feeds off fear, and this is when we're seeing the level of Conrad's fear. How much fear is pinballing around him. And I think that's to try and give you some level of understanding of his behaviour. This is that he's many things, and among one of the things he's scared, absolutely terrified, and you see it in that moment. And when the scene snaps back into like the real life and the lights come back up again, you see him just take a almost shudder slightly and almost be like, oh, let me get back into character as the nice, caring boyfriend. Like, I forgot to mention, Emma, your favourite part, that the Doctor's monologue. It felt like a little bit of an allegory for writers who write the show in the face of online scrutiny, as well as a wider social point. It felt there's a little bit of, they're talking about you, person watching at home, and also us, people podcasting about it. In fact, sorry, I meant to set this up before we started recording, but I'm just going to try and quickly do it now. So in terms of the online scrutiny that this show is under, so I've gone into YouTube, I've typed Doctor Who Lucky Day in, and there's lots of people with their reaction videos and, doing what we do. But you will always, down on the main page or down the side, you see video titles. I'm looking at one right now. News, ? Stars either side. Doctor Who's lowest, all caps, viewing figures, Lucky Day overnight ratings. That's an example of the kind of thing I'm talking about. This is literally on YouTube right now as we're recording. Like every week when Doctor Who's on, if you go on YouTube and try and look up stuff for the episode, here's another one. Lucky Day might be the most divisive Doctor Who ever. And then on the thumbnail for the episode, it says truth bombed, ? With any Doctor Who episode, you go on YouTube, you get, and I'm sure it's the same if you go on TikTok, reams of episode titles, videos that are just kind of, you don't even believe this. You don't really, maybe you didn't like it as much, but you don't believe this, but you're just trying to get people to click on it and then hopefully argue with you. And then if you're one of the writers, and you're writing for Doctor Who, which for many people it's their dream job, or one of their dream jobs, and you're having to deal with this shit every week, and particularly if you're someone who posts on Instagram about it and you've got people jumping in your comments, I definitely understand that it did not feel just like it was the Doctor talking in that scene. There's a line, I think towards the end where Conrad, he's like saying, don't pull the trigger, because he points to his camera like, the world is watching. Apparently he only has 80,000 subscribers. One thing that I also think about these people is they often have delusions of grandeur and they really think they're the main character. They have huge main character syndrome. Even if he's making a nice living out of it, but like you say, Emma, most people are not terminally online, and most people in the world actually won't know who he is. The idea that the world is watching is ridiculous. Like, he probably would have been famous in the UK for maybe a month.
Well, I mean, I'll tell you something that Chuck literally said to me. So this is my better half. Basically, right. So after we watched the Robot Revolution, we were talking about it, and it was a few days afterwards, and he said, "So, hey, what's all this incel stuff?" I was like, "You're on the internet. How do you not know about any of this? Not in his algorithm. It completely not in his orbit. Got no idea about it." And this is a man who's on the internet as much as I am. It's that thing of like, unless your bubble's talking about it, unless it's in your algorithm, it feels like it's all pervasive and everyone's talking about it all the time. But it's not the case.
It's interesting that you say, Shane, that it seems like the Doctor is almost like talking as one of the writers, because, in the last week or two, Russell T. Davies did that interview, was it Radio Times or somewhere, where he says, I don't give a shit about all the complaints about people saying that Doctor Who is woke. He says he's tuning all that stuff out, which he probably is in a way, but certainly they're bringing it into the writing of the show. And it's interesting to think, I meant to mention this earlier, that this was probably written like 2 years ago, and it was filmed a year ago, and it feels like it's even more relevant now than it would have been 2 years ago or last year.
So one of the things about this depiction of the conspiratorial stuff that didn't grab me as well, I think this is where I have sympathy with the Pete McTighe and Russell T. Davies, is that, and this is not their fault, so far all the episodes have been about 45 minutes. I suspect maybe the finale will be an hour. I think what they were trying to tell bumped up against the ceiling of 45 minutes, because there's a lot of good ideas in this, and I almost felt they maybe should have taken one away, because we felt we were bouncing from point to point to point rather than allowing it to really resonate. The kind of stuff where sometimes I just need you to keep the camera on this character a little while longer. I just need a reaction shot from that character soaking up what's just been said or what's just happened, because that's when it really means something. I think of Lux and some of the stuff when Ncuti dealing with racism, and they just set the camera on him and they just watch his face for like about 5 seconds. It's only 5 seconds, but that makes the scene work, and you give the actor the best chance to really deliver on their performance.
Would you have almost preferred it if they didn't have the Ruby thing? If it wasn't her getting catfished for 20 minutes, if they just maybe started the episode with, Unit's got a problem, like Ruby's there working on it, but like, this is the problem. We're now having this social issue with people going, hey, there's this giant paramilitary organisation doing weird stuff with our tax money. What's all that about? And had it as like purely a social commentary episode.
I think so. I'm not even saying what bit had to go, but one thing did. I think if you have an hour, you're probably fine. And I'm sure earlier drafts of this were probably a bit tighter, and even maybe the rough cut of this episode was great. And then you got the BBC saying, well, we've got, I don't know, pointless celebrities at 7:50, so you're going to have to end this after 45 minutes. Then you're like, oh, fuck's sake, well, no, that scene's got to go, that scene's got to go. That reaction shot, the scene of Conrad meeting the family, that was great work, but now we've got to lose it all. So I have sympathy. That's some of the difficulties you have when you're working on, just in TV in general. So I have sympathy for the writers on that, but maybe, in hindsight, they could have just lost one sub-point. One thing that I don't think was ever directly expressed, but I think was there, and what I did like about this, as far as Conrad's depiction, along with the conspiratorial. So they never say what part of the political spectrum he's on. He could easily be far left as far right, but why I suspect he's probably far right is because this character is a massive misogynist.
Oh, yeah.
When the twist comes, he mentioned that putting up with Ruby's insecurity and vanity, when of course it's his own that she should be worried about. When you said some of his behaviour, Emma, early on, he takes a picture of Ruby and sticks it online saying, have you seen this woman? Immediately I was like, oh, no, I don't like, just no, I don't like that at all. On my rewatch, when they've gone for a coffee and then Conrad says, Ruby give him the antidote, and Conrad says, I'll take it on one condition, if I can buy you dinner. And then he goes, or maybe we both can buy dinner. Like, I don't know if that's too old-fashioned. And you feel, he's being nice, correcting himself. In hindsight, you realise, oh no, he's remembering to perform as a quote-unquote nice guy. And it shows he knows how to be decent because he can pretend to be decent. This isn't like, he's misguided. No, he knows better, but he chooses not to do better. And sometimes, not all the time, but sometimes when you see people act out, whether it's online or IRL, it's like, they didn't know any better. It's like, you sure about that? Generally, most people know when they're acting out of line. It was interesting as well that Conrad in the first half he was coming off to me like very early Hugh Grant, not the part of Hugh Grant career now, which is a lot better. But, like Four Weddings, Hugh Grant, bumbling and stammering and...
Like, he's definitely putting on a performance of being like a soft boy. You feel like he looked at a TikTok about how to... one of those like alpha male things of how to like entrap a woman, essentially.
Yes, very much.
And I felt to me that it's interesting. He's almost got like a serial killer's backstory of being like neglected by it. They basically make out to be a semi-alcoholic parent who definitely is much more interested in her boyfriend than him. But it's that thing of like, also they're giving him that right wing, keep bringing up Andrew Tate, but he's the one who sort of really is the most analogous to Conrad Clark. Andrew Tate is a very overt misogynist, but the sort of the low-key misogyny that I think you deal with every day, he obviously hates his mum, but it's that thing of like, he's paid for her to stay in, some mansion in the south of France. That thing of like, he hates her, but he loves her at the same time because it's his mum and all that sort of thing. So you can really easily read into that background of his. But I think if you explore going to that thing, it's like, I think that's why he has got that thing of like, I was sort of convinced that it was going to be a thing of like, he's grifting. What's fundamentally wrong with Conrad Clark is that the Doctor appearing and being there and all these sort of things that he does, he wants so badly to believe in something like that, almost, you feel. But the Doctor turning up reminds him of the little boy that he was, that obviously had loads of imagination, was full of energy and ideas, but kept getting slapped down by his mum, abused by his mum. And seeing the Doctor reminds him of that, what he would perceive as a weak child. And so he can't stand that. So that's where that, to be an alpha male or to be a winner, because everything is transactional in these worlds. There's nothing that you just do altruistically or because it's a good thing to do. Everything is about, how do I win? So to be a winner, he has to oppose the Doctor, as he says, reject his reality.
Very much so. I mean, it's notable, I think, something Chris touched on. That line really was very telling when he had said he had taken the antidote. Coming to the twist, we haven't got there yet. He says, everything the Doctor was, I can be. He reminded me a little bit of like Syndrome in The Incredibles, which is such an underrated film, of someone who, after an encounter with the hero, doesn't actually, like, Conrad doesn't want to travel with the Doctor. He wants to be the Doctor. He wants to displace the Doctor and be him.
I'll tell you, it reminds me of most of it, because obviously Russell's MCU is showing again. Spider-Man and Mysterio, from Far From Home.
That's a good one too.
Very big similarities, between Syndrome and Mysterio, definitely. Again, when you think of the misogyny, when Ruby says, like, I'll come with you, like, we'll be a team, like, no, stay in the pub. And then Ruby goes off with a weapon, and the camera just stays on Conrad for half a second, and I noticed on the rewatch, there's a resentment of this misogynist slur telling me what to do. Who does she think she is? Because
Ruby says, like, just before that, there's that bloke who says, you put you in charge. And she says, yeah, all right, big man, you go out there then. And I think, obviously, if you heard that, say that, that's like, if you're Conrad.
And also the way that it is, and rightly so in this situation, a woman being assertive and a woman attempting to take charge of the situation, and not for ego or selfishness, but trying to stop everyone dying. This is part of where I struggle with the episode. So the ideas, we're talking about the ideas, I think all the ideas are great. Some of the execution, and when, the fake Shriek take the masks off, they all come off as really one note, like mustache twirling villains. There's everything but like a maniacal laugh was in there. And so I see what Pete McTighe and RTD are going for. It didn't feel they really drilled down on the mindset. Maybe this is in earlier drafts or earlier cuts. When you think of how Conrad particularly talks when Conrad is revealed to be who he is, a lot of the words and terms and vernacular is very generic. It's like they ripped some stuff off a few social media posts they saw about, well, this is how they suppress us, and this is what they do to carry out their agenda and stuff, and use taxpayers' money, and almost stuff like, did you just like buy a couple of Daily Mail editions and then just pick stuff out from certain columnist paragraphs? And what I think, if you're going to do this, like, no objection at all, but you really actually need to if you're going to indict an online culture that radicalizes people into conspiracy theories, you have to slightly indict a culture that fans, including us, are a part of. Think of a year ago when, and some people have pointed this out, that remember all that stuff online that people were arguing about how Millie Gibson was a nightmare to work with and everyone hated her and they're so glad that she was going, and that seems to be, as far as we're aware, total bullshit. And even if you didn't believe it, that's something that fans themselves jumped on. To an extent, to varied degrees, your mileage varies, but we can all be a little bit complicit in this. Doesn't mean we'll turn out like Conrad, of course. But it's like, if you're really going to do it, and maybe, I get it, you don't want to come off as attacking the fans, but if you're going to do it, you kind of got to really go in. If you're going to make the tackle, you've got to make the full tackle.
Yeah, I mean, I sort of read the hench people, if you like. It sort of reminded me of Dr. Bubble, talking about online reaction. There are a lot of people that didn't get Dr. Bubble.
That is true.
I mean,
that's true.
And they had to, like, beat it into their heads about, like, they had to have that end scene because they had to make it obvious, and people still didn't get it. I agree with you on that respect. I can't disagree with you at all. But I think they have to put that in there because otherwise people won't get it.
It's a difficult lift. Like this episode, the Dr. Light episode is always tough to write, and what they were going for, they went for something quite big. The main reason why I gave it a 6, while the ideas are great, the execution always matters just as much. And I really didn't like Jonah Howard-King's performance in this at all. I found him, and I'm not attacking him personally, I'm sure he's a really nice person, but I'm just analysing the work. I found his performance lightweight. Both sides, pre-twist after twist. I didn't find him particularly menacing. I found him irritating, but not irritating in a, you're meant to be irritated. Like, the best example of, I think of someone like the actor, and I can't remember his name, I think it's Jack something, that played Joffrey in Game of Thrones. Horrible person. But he was incredibly engaging as a performer. He made me want someone to cut his head off, but he didn't make me want to turn the telly off. Jonah Howard-King, I was kind of like, okay, next scene. Can we get to a character who's better at doing their job?
Well, I mean, the gold standard for this is Lindy Pepper Bean, who genuinely I wanted to feet first through a wood chipper, and he fucking sucks, but he's not on that level. Yeah, I mean, there was some great stuff online where some people said these two, as a Lindy Pepper Bean and Conrad Clark, really need to meet. I definitely I can see what people are saying with that. Because
that fanfic will be online any gang out. That fanfic will be there.
100%.
I'm just saying.
It's probably being written as I'm editing this episode.
Genuinely nauseated.
But I found the line readings really self-serious and really slow because I'm making a point as I am the villain, and I found the acting bad. That really hurt. I think if you get just a better, because he's very important. He's actually in a way the lead character this episode. Everything happens because of him. Very much like Belinda in The Robot Revolution. You don't really have an episode that he's the one who acts on the narrative and makes it all function. And with a better performance, this is a much better episode. It's subjective whether you like the performance or not.
Yeah, because I kind of read that performance of like, because both of those performances are acts. Truly, neither of those people is the real Conrad Clark. I don't think we ever meet the real Conrad Clark, even in that last bit with the Doctor. Or maybe the only time we ever see the real Conrad Clark is when after the Doctor snaps his fingers and then he says, "Was that real?" I think that might be the only time he's really him. Otherwise, it's all a performance. So, I mean, I read that where it's annoyed you. I think I just sort of read it as he's pretending on both aspects. So I kind of let it fly.
If he's a sociopath, there may not be a real Conrad Clark.
I don't think there's an if.
Like, there's no. I'm just saying, if that's how you read the character, which is obvious.
Yeah, that was just
there may not be a real one. There's just a series of aspects that he pretends to be with different people as he needs to.
I don't actually disagree with that analysis at all. I think, and I'm literally talking about the acting performance rather than the characterization. The characterization I'm fine with. The performance I just thought was bad. I thought it was really lacking, and there's been a lot of talk about him being cast. Most people knew about this casting for about a year or so. He's come off, I didn't watch it, but he was Eric in the Disney live action Little Mermaid, so he's come, from a place of, this guy has some pedigree. But I've never seen him out myself, but I was like, I'm not engaged with this performance, and I need to be engaged for it to work. Characterization's great, because he's always looking to absolve himself of responsibility. Of course, like to your point with your favourite part, Chris, of course he doesn't learn, because he has zero humility. And that's one thing these social media people and online personalities have in common. I mean, it's very funny that there's a post I happened to notice on Threads where someone said, "Okay, I haven't finished the episode yet, but Conrad is, all caps, adorable, and he must be protected at all costs." If this was midway through the episode, I thought, is this an AI bot, or is this someone taking the piss? But then I looked at their Threads posts on, and then the future Threads posts are, haha, okay, regret, LMAO. Then this episode went from, I'm so happy for Ruby, how sweet, to I want to redacted this man so fast. I assume redacted means kill and not something else. And also rewatching the episode, and I'm so mad. Because now you know what's happening next.
Always wait till the end. Wait till the end, everybody.
Yeah, there's the moral of the story. And I think what is the most enlightening thing from what they're doing with this episode and the kind of things they're trying to address is, as we've said, that Conrad doesn't, not what facts you present, Conrad doesn't care. And it's because I know, like, we've seen in a time where sometimes it's like facts don't care about your feelings or fuck your feelings or whatever. But the problem is that feelings seem to be the only thing. Everything now is a battle of feelings. Feelings themselves are now in competition. It's mine v yours. My feelings is your feelings, and mine must win. And if you live under that mindset, then of course you act the way Conrad acts. Because it doesn't matter about what evidence you're presenting to me. This is just about how I feel. And I feel like this. And you see in conversations online all the time, well, it's just my opinion. Well, I'm allowed to say what I think. Like, no one said, free speech. No one said none of these things don't matter. That doesn't mean that you're right. And if everything's about feelings and my feelings must be validated, then feelings are naturally in competition. And that's the only thing that matters. And then you get to a position that we're in this episode, and sadly in the real world.
We've lost the idea of objective truth in the last 20 or 30 years. Like, we all would argue about different points of view, but we've lost the idea that there is an objective truth, that what is happening is actually happening. Now we just kind of create our own realities. And I think that, as I mentioned at the beginning of the episode, I think that is a lot of what this Doctor Who episode is about.
Yeah, well, it's no longer objective truth. It's about speaking your truth. And my tone of voice sounds like I'm shitting on that. There is plenty of space for that. It's actually speaking your truth has helped give people who didn't have a voice. But when you prioritize it as the only thing, that's not productive for anyone, for the individual or the collective either. So, Emma, if we come just to additional observations, just for stuff that we've missed.
Shall I bring up my grand theory now?
Yes, because you did have a grand theory in our Discord, which you can now share with everyone.
Yes, so basically...
Sorry, just before you share it, I'll just say, this is not Emma saying what's going to happen. This is just a potential theory based on what Emma has seen and her trying to make a deduction from there. It doesn't mean she's right. If she's not right, we don't want your emails. Sorry, Emma.
However, if I am right, I will never stop going on about it. I'm just going to say, right? So and I have been met with some skepticism from my sounding board, in my poor put upon husband has expressed some skepticism. So basically, I ended up writing out Conrad's whole timeline just to make sure this works, and it does just about. It's a bit tight in places, but essentially what I think is now happening is that Belinda Chandra is a think tank plant. If you work out the timeline, which I think I just about have, is that so Conrad very much implies that he has met Belinda before the Doctor has. Obviously,
yes, there's a line, have you met Belinda Chandra yet?
Have you met Belinda Chandra yet? So I think that you can argue about whether if Mrs. Flood puts him up to it, because the timeline works. If you accept that this episode, the Ruby and Conrad stuff happens in Q1 of 2025. So somewhere between February and May now. So we got to the end of May, because that's when we definitely know that the robot revolution happens, is that end of May point that Belinda wants to get back to. So you can argue about whether he does it before, like does it on his own initiative, or Mrs. Flood puts him up to it after she lets him out of jail, because again, there is enough time, because if we accept that series 2 is happening in real time, then this meeting happens on the 3rd of May when we've seen it. And in the Doctor's timeline, it must be somewhere probably after Joy to the World happens, but not before Robot Revolution, because you definitely could read into it that he goes to find Belinda because he's now been tipped off by Conrad. But I think that Conrad seeks out Belinda Chandra and persuades her, flips her, however you want to put it, to be a think tank member and to be essentially like Turlough was for the Black Guardian, like a snake in the grass, find evidence or film stuff or do something, essentially. I mean, because how else do you explain that she knows what a fucking TARDIS is in Robot Revolution?
And also in that episode, the Doctor is looking for Belinda, but doesn't actually reveal why.
Why? We don't know why he's looking for her. That fits. I think that's going to be the reveal in episode 7, but I don't think she's still... I mean, because the thing that Chuck said to me is, how can she see what she's seen and still think it's fake? I think that probably that it also explains that very abrupt switch in Lux, that she goes from being very like, what the fuck, and to really being like, well, I can't explain this, essentially, any other way, and sort of going, okay, this is real. The thing I found a bit weird about Belinda, she's always very demonstratively going on about her parents. It sort of like just rubbed me the wrong way when she kept bringing it up. And she brings it up in every episode that we've seen her in, obviously, apart from this one, because, she's on screen for seconds. I think that is where this is going. And to that point, I think this also wraps into the other thing that I think is happening about the Mrs. Flood is the harbinger rather than the main baddie, because there's a lot of speculation about it being the gods of Ragnarok from 7.0. I think it's going to be the threefold deity of mischief, etc., who I think are the Doctor Who fans from Lux. So I think that she is constructing a TV show for them to watch with the idea of like, look, here's a brilliant twist of like, Belinda's actually going to betray the Doctor because she's a member of Think Tank. Isn't this brilliant entertainment for you, these gods? So that's where I think we're going.
Well, there has been talk apparently that the Doctor will be in the finale will be fighting some kind of unholy trinity.
Yes.
So that also underscores your point.
The 3 Doctor Who fans.
It's definitely an interesting theory and has some credibility to it. I will say, if it is that, or even anything similar to that, oh God, is Russell sticking the knife in? That will be a heartbreaker for fans because, and this is a very good thing, more than I expected. Generally speaking, obviously not saying 100%, but fans seem to really take into Belinda.
Yeah, they really love it. I mean, especially I really saw it was like
her.
It was like that meme that the friendship ended with Ruby Sunday. Now Belinda Chandra is my best friend thing. But I've said this for years and years, and I thought that they should have done it with Clara because I will talk uninterrupted for 10 minutes. I'm not going to do it now because it's not irrelevant. But I've always advocated and banged the table for they should do the full naughty companion version of the idea, right? The true Turlough, but take it to the logical end of that idea. And they sort of touched on it when when Clara switched on the Doctor to try and get Danny back. I think the true snake in the grass, hidden agenda companion idea has never been done to the full extent that they could do it. And I've always banged the table that they should, and I think this is it.
I'll tell you something, had they done that with Clara, Jenna Coleman would have been the perfect actor.
She would have ate it up.
General fan reaction, feeling around her would have been very different if they'd asked her to do that because she would have absolutely nailed that.
Well, I think they should have done it because there's that shot of her standing by her mum's grave, and her mum's date of death is the day of the Auton invasion in Rose. So you could then say, well, she was killed by an Auton. So wouldn't it have been interesting if Clara had found out, maybe in that episode where she reads the Doctor's archive inside the TARDIS, right? If she'd found out the Doctor was sort of directly, indirectly responsible for her mum's death, and then obviously having to figure out her feelings to this man, it would have made the ending where she chooses to throw herself in the Doctor's timeline so much more powerful. I've always thought that, but that's just a me thing. I mean, I did get very caught up with this. It did sort of take up an unfortunate amount of my brain for this weekend. I think it's interesting when you go back and again, when you sort of watch again with the idea of like the manosphere and the right-wing grifters in mind, all those little things that they bring up about Conrad. It's like, oh, of course he's done that to build up his credibility, and the guy posting his thirst traps and the sort of the weird little subtle things that he did. I want to give a shout out as well to Ruth Madeley's Shirley Bingham, my sarcastic queen.
She's tremendous in this episode.
Yeah. Are you just collecting up mums? I love that one.
Also, when I think it's Kate is like cussing out Conrad, and Shirley's like, maybe just throw in a compliment.
Yeah, I love that. That's great.
Yeah, no, Ruth Madeley is a real boon to the show. I'm mentally looking. She better be in. She's in between the land and the sea. I'm hugely.
Oh yeah, that's the other thing about this. I think this is going to be a big lead into between land and the sea, especially 100%. As they're obviously now sort of not just implying but outright saying that Kate is kind of losing the sauce a bit. I would have let the fucking thing eat him, but I mean, going too far with her solution to the problem, if you like. This week, I will mention that her old man would have just murked that man on sight, but before he even opened his mouth. I think the third Doctor, the third Doctor who could see the good in a fucking Balrog, couldn't really help this bloke. I think it's interesting that the 15th Doctor has really come up against maybe the two most immovable objects in Doctor Who history, in Lindy Pepperbean and Conrad Clark.
Yeah, and what are they, just two human beings?
Yeah.
Okay, so yeah, Chris, any additional observations?
Is Think Tank related to the think tank that we see in the story Robot?
Yeah.
With the Scientific Reform Society. I mean, they were kind of a post on Threads described them as science supremacist Nazis, which I thought was a good summation of their philosophy. Is there a connection there? I mean, I would think that, Russell T and Pete McKay are both fans, so there has to be some reason why, even if it's just for the let's repeat the name and see what happens, but maybe there'll be more with that. There's the mention of Albion TV, presumably one of the things that brings Roger William to power later on. Maybe that's Britain's equivalent of Fox News. Kate Stewart's affair with Ibrahim, that's like a PR nightmare waiting to happen. An HR nightmare. Sorry, that's an HR nightmare waiting to happen.
Yeah, well, I remember saying at the end, because it's hinted at the end of the last series, and I think I said that's maybe HR violation right there, and it is quite clear that the violations are continuing.
Well, I mean, according to my timeline, and from what he says in the episode, when Conrad unsuccessfully interviewed for UNIT, he would have been 16 or 17 years old. And that's in 2017. Yeah, 2017. So contemporary, that's when season 10 is happening. So that's Bill, 12th Doctor and Nardole. So UNIT isn't really present in those. So I was surprised, though, that Kate is bothering to interview the teenagers that they're recruiting. I thought that sort of didn't quite ring true, because that seemed odd. I mean, it's not odd, I suppose, that they, essentially a military organisation, as it sort of was, military/scientific, would interview people straight out of school. I mean, MI6 and all that recruit, A-level kids. So it's not outrageous. But you got to remember, you got to see why she keeps it in the family now, and employs companions and children of companions, because you're not going to have to deal with this sort of shit.
Right. The only other thing I wanted to mention is there was an interesting aside from Ruby where she said meeting her mom was a long story and meeting her dad was an even longer story. So
and we don't
a pretty
see him.
Tall order. That how could it be an even longer story than I looked into a time window, I saw the entire universe get destroyed by an Egyptian god, and then it came back, and then, you know what I mean? Like, what's an even longer story to that? about meeting the gag, and is that significant? Are we going to learn anything about that by the end of the season? I just thought it was something that was almost said as people were walking out of the room during a scene, and I didn't know if that was going to end up being something later or not, whether we're going to get any filling in of that information or whether it was just a joke of her kind of being flip about it, you know?
Yeah, I sort of more read it as sort of flip. Actually, Kate Stewart, can we please talk about your control of your employees / other, companions? Maybe keep an eye on them while we're out here doing podcasts.
This is one of my points. So, Unit or Ruby did no due diligence on his podcast, which I used in scare quotes beforehand. They're just casually Unit employees casually chatting about their work now online.
Well, I mean that they didn't do any due diligence on this insider that he gets in.
Yeah,
Unit,
they did no
where
due diligence.
Just does
no
a quick
due diligence
thing. And
Jordan Lang.
Yeah, I was like, come on now, you didn't even do any background stuff when you employed him. Come on.
And he seems to be quite significant as well. That was one thing. I'm just like, we're just like anyone can just bowl up it and get a job. Like I'm all for getting the unemployment rate down, but maybe just verify a bit with a bit more rigor who you're hiring. And like Ruby talking about Unit, I'm like, it's because Unit is basically MI6. Are we just casually sharing state secrets now? Apparently we're fine with that.
I will bring up one point actually that I sort of do keep seeing online is that for some reason some fans are sort of reading this as like, hey, quasi undemocratic, paramilitary, unrestrained forces are fine. Apparently, actually, the Doctor gives them a thumbs up. That's not what this story is saying. No one is saying that Unit aren't kind of problematic, but that's not really the issue here. Also, I think that, like I said, there's too much in this story already. That's for the spin-off. That's for Between the Land, the War Between the Land and the Sea. Yeah.
I'm looking for that there because it's a Unit show. So that's where you can get into depth, that kind of depth.
It's funny, Shane, that you say, didn't they do any due diligence about him and Conrad and the podcast? According to a post that was on the main Doctor Who account, Ruby's episode in the podcast is supposed to be episode 204. So there have been 203 previous episodes that they could have checked out. What were the other 203 episodes that were basically leading to this whole idea of meeting Ruby? Were they all about this kind of government conspiracy shit, or was it like, a pop culture kind of thing, and it kind of swerved into doing this interview with Ruby? Or I don't know. But you're right that they had 203 other episodes they could have listened to figure it out, or they could have looked in their own HR files and figured out that they did interview this guy for a job, and Kate Stewart wrote, "Don't trust him" on the application. So there was very little diligence being done there.
It's a lot of information, but like, what else is the links for? Useless shit. Get him to sift through all this stuff or set up alerts for these things. Chuck made this point to me actually as well. What is this podcast about? Like you're saying, Chris, because it can't be the full tilt fuck Unit thing going on, because otherwise, surely Ruby would have listened to, at least checked it out. Cherry would have checked it out if no one else had.
I can even understand like a fake setup of podcasts, just a fake setup, but Unit wouldn't have checked. Yeah, even just to be like, I'm not sure about this guy now. We don't have to like arrest him, but let's just say no.
Or shut it down. Perhaps that could be the thing of like, they shut down my podcast because I'm talking about it and all that sort of thing. That might have been a better angle, because like, unless it's sort of one of those things of, I said conspiracy theories used to be fun. When you read about them, it's always a bit of a competition of how quickly did they get anti-Semitic. Is it that thing of like, quickly? Yes. So is it a thing of like the
Jews? The Jews control this, the Jews control that. Puppet masters.
So is the podcast a bit of a catfish, and that it sort of seems quite benign? But if you then get into his community and like say go on his Discord, then quickly it's very obviously like conspiracy and all this sort of thing. So is the podcast just a bit surface level to bring people in, and then actually it's quite sinister once you sort of get into the community and that sort of thing? But again, it's sort of like, if you scrutinise it at all, that kind of is a bit of a wobble in the episode. Don't really make sense.
We revealed who Jordan Lang is, and Shedwick's point about, there's like lots of bouncing off VPNs all over, and it's like, I'm pretty sure Unit can get through VPNs. As you say, Emma, the Vlinks did it very quickly. Some people online made the point that the Vlinks seem to take off when things get really tough, like evacuated. The internet was not impressed with the Vlinks. They said they're just useless piece of shit. They should like literally smelt him or strip him for parts and then sell him on the dark web.
Wow.
Yeah, no, there were some people like they were pissed at the Blinks. They were just like, "What the fuck is this? Where are you going? Evacuate!" I think like this is when we need you. So yeah, some people were not impressed with the Blinks, and one would hope maybe this is something to. I hope they put that in the war between the land and the sea of like, yeah, let's do a bit more due diligence on people in future. Just throw that in there. So some stuff I noticed when the twist is revealed when they're outside the pub. What happened to everyone else in the pub? Like, were they also in on it? Like, maybe.
It just seems to be the kid. I think it's like, I say the kids, like the 20-somethings, Conrad's mates. Yeah. I mean, I think like all the elders that are in the pub are like, oh, the power's back on. Yeah, I have a pint, please. And just weren't even bothered about what was going on. Just like carried on. Yeah.
Quick word about the director, Peter Hoare. He's had a very busy week. Well, not in terms of work, but in terms of work being on TV, because he's had this episode of Doctor Who. He directed last week's episode of The Last of Us. So a big week for that household. He used quite a few Dutch angles when the camera is tilted almost, and that always gives you the idea something is sinister, something's off centre. So did 73 Yards, and obviously again a country pub. That was another similarity between them. And I did like how it was filmed. The scene when Conrad talks about, scare quotes, his dead mum, when they have their, I think their dinner date. The camera is like right opposite Conrad's face, and then right opposite Ruby's face, and then right opposite Conrad's face. That those angles I thought were very striking. That was pretty good. The Doctor, the first scene on New Year's, the Doctor realizes he's on Earth, and then realizes he's in London, and just the way that Ncuti said London, as in like London, which that was like, oh, I've never heard that before. That's interesting. We've spoken a little bit about him doing Conrad a kindness, giving him 50p. Again, you're looking at similarities from Russell's era. This is almost like, oh, this is what happened at the end of Time Part 2 in his New Year's Eve experience with Rose.
Too much to drink?
Something like that.
Maybe it's time you went home.
Yeah.
Anyway, Happy New Year.
And you. What year is this?
Blimey, how much have you had? 2005, January the 1st.
2005. Tell you what, I bet you're going to have a really great year.
That's the beginning of something big. And this is the beginning of something big, but in a totally opposite way. Like in some ways, so much of what we're getting in the series is almost a commentary on Russell's earlier era. So we're getting things that's similar, and then they do something different with them.
So it's quite interesting though when you think about that scene, because this is a predestination paradox, because the Doctor gives him that knowing what he becomes because of the timeline, right? If he doesn't do it, then none of the things could happen. He doesn't meet Belinda, so he knows he has to do it, surely.
Yeah, fixed point. In the scene in the shop, when Conrad gets the Shriek vomits on Conrad, we all notice a lot of shop mannequins.
Oh, I did not like that.
See, that was actually Peter Hoare's inclusion, apparently. That was a deliberate callback to Rose. The episode Rose.
The internet was very convinced this was going to be, basically, that this was going to be Henrik's, and that Ruby and 15 would be in the building at the same time as 9 and Rose. But I will give a massive shout out, because there's that shot of that, again, the Dutch angle, and then up the escalator, and there's that mannequin at the top. I shit a brick at that. I genuinely did not. Yeah. It was really like one of the most scary Doctor Who shots ever. Did not enjoy that one bit.
Very well put together. The same building as well. Another reason why some people maybe thought, oh, it'll be like, when Rose meets 9.
Yeah, talking of locations, and we'll just jump back to that bit of New Year's Eve. As a person from London, that took me out a little bit, because that very much doesn't look like London. It looks like Cardiff. I know, I've been there. And the second point is, if that was genuinely New Year's Eve on that bit, that alleyway would have been ram-packed solid with human beings. There would have been
no space,
nowhere.
Yeah, I've been there on New Year's. Yeah. You cannot move.
I've never been there because of the state of it. I've seen it on telly. I don't want to come. I don't want to stand there till 4 o'clock in the morning because I can't get out.
I would not recommend it to anyone. Been there, did that, never want to do it again. Rick had a question last week, which I think has now probably been answered, where he said he and his wife were talking and saying about how the TARDIS can't get Belinda home, and back to 24th of May. And it's like, well, have they tried the 23rd, the 25th, or even the 17th? And we can see that the closest they could get was 2007 on their Vindicator, at least for now. That would explain, why they haven't even gotten close to May 24th. And the final point is just, when I mentioned the similarities of 73 Yards, this is now 2 years in a row where the Dr. Light episodes is really about the world coming apart. So, Chris, if we come to your MVP, please.
Kate Lethbridge-Stewart and Gemma Redgrave. I mean, she's been doing this role for 13 years now. How long was Nicholas Courtney, the Brigadier, like on TV? Like maybe 13 years, 15 years, something like that. Like just to think about that, she's been doing the role that long was pretty amazing. I'm sorry, what were you going to say, Emma?
Well, I was going to say, is it because it's spearheaded in 1970, wasn't it? And then obviously he's 26. He's in season 26, which is 1989. So 19 years, I think.
19 years, yeah.
For Nick Courtney. Yeah. So she's getting there.
You're better on math than I am, Emma. Thank you.
No, it's only because there's a round number at the beginning. Otherwise, I'll be here all night.
I've heard some corners of fandom complain over the years about her for various reasons. I've always really liked her. I mean, she's no nonsense. She's a good ally for the Gawker. And she was a consistent face in the first 5-6 years of the rebooted series. It seemed like every time we met Unit, we met new people. And after a while, you didn't really feel any attachment to any of them. So I'm glad that she stuck around. I mean, we see her tender side. We see her brutal side. I mean, she's motherly to Ruby. As we talk about, she's got a potential HR nightmare going on with Ibrahim, with having a thing with him. But when she's confronting Conrad at the Unit HQ, man, she just lets the Shriek just go out after him. I mean, and to me, both sides of those characters, the tender side and the brutal side, were played very believably. I mean, she's great at her job, but she's very protective of those that she considers the Unit family. And frankly, when Conrad started insulting the Brigadier, I'm sitting on my couch and I'm yelling, "That's it. Shoot that fucker in the head." I'm just saying. Just let him have it. Feed him to the Shriek, shoot him in the head, do whatever you got to do. It kind of reinforces to me that, I mean, if you listen to the Unit audios from Big Finish, it feels like Kate is ready to lead the spinoff that is ahead. I think they're taking her character to an interesting place that is going to be deeper and more conflicted than we've seen even in the last 13 years that she's been doing this role. Giving her props for that, and to the writers for finding a new place to take her.
Emma, if we have your MVP?
I'm going to completely co-sign Chris and say Joan Redgrave for me. She knocked it out of the park. As a parent who's frequently exasperated, I definitely saw the annoyed mum come out in Kate of like that thing of like, I've done this in my parenting journey of like, your kid will not shut up about a thing. And you go, okay, do it then. I'll wait here while you get hurt because I told you 5,000 times. I'm not going to tell you again. Go on then. That's extremely #relatable.
And my favorite line during that part was, "I'm glad the Gawker's not here to see this because he wouldn't have liked it." You know,
she wouldn't even stop me. I think that sort of leads into what I really like about her character, in that her passion is obviously about that science leads Unit and we are here for the sole protection of the human race and that sort of thing. That is her whole reason for getting up in the morning, right? But I really like with the Doctor that she's got really complicated feelings about him. She loves him, but she's worried about him, that he's an unrestrained power. All the things, extremely complicated things about the Doctor, about her dad. And I think that you see that brought out in Joan Redgrave's performance. So, yeah, loved it.
So my MVP, I struggle a little bit with this. And the end with Millie Gibson. It is curious how, and I'm thoroughly enjoying Belinda Chandra and Friday Setu's performance, but there has been a bit of shiny new companion, fuck the old one. And I've said many times in the last series how impressed I was with Millie Gibson, how impressed as I am with her as an actor. I just think she's an outrageous talent. I think her ceiling is so high. And even an episode that I don't think functioned well, she didn't totally let some of the stuff around her drag her down totally. I think she would have shone more if she had a better scene partner. I'm not going to blame any of the actors or the casting for this. Chemistry is such an ineffable thing. It's just there, it's not. I don't think the chemistry between her and Jonah Howking was great. Probably contributed to why I just thought this episode was meh, it was okay. But I did like some of the themes. Again, even if the execution wasn't always great, the themes of, and Russell's spoken about this, it's not easy for an old companion to get on with life after the Doctor, because meeting the Doctor inherently changes you. And that's then a problem if you're no longer with him, because you can't go back to your life before because you're not the person you were before. And that's where the complication comes in, and Ruby's only beginning to figure that out. It's important to remember, Ruby's still, like, the character is still, 21? She's still incredibly young. You don't know yourself when you're 21 anyway, but knowing yourself with those experiences, as good and bad, they're all intense experiences. We haven't often seen a writer focus on that on the show, and it was good. It was a very interesting place to take the story. It's not easy for like older companions just to settle down with someone, just to have a like relationship. It reminds me actually of the bit when Conrad asks, "Oh, was the Doctor your boyfriend?" in a kind of slightly possessive, jealous way. But even if it's not a romantic relationship, it is an intense relationship. That's a big lift for any actor. And Millie Gibson's more than up to the task. And I think it's a pity that she's still young enough to return now and then, but it is a pity that we won't be seeing her on a regular basis, because I personally always enjoyed her performance. And her high points, 73 yards last year, I think are as high as I've seen a companion get. And the final point about Ruby, she does kind of get gunged on quite a bit, because she gets it in this episode as well from the Shriek. But you think of that in Space Babies, and it's like, yeah, she does seem to be a bit of a target in that respect.
Well, so that and don't go to the pub with her, because you're in a 4th episode of a Doctor Who series, and you should leave immediately.
Particularly in the countryside.
Yeah.
So if you have any thoughts, you can email us at analysingdoc2@gmail.com, and we'll cross social media at analysingdw. So Chris and Emma, thank you for both being here.
Thanks, Shane.
Thanks for having us back.
Thank you for listening. We'll be back next week to analyse the story and the engine. Until next time. Our logo was courtesy of Scott Mattison. His work can be found at planetrisecreative.com and on Twitter at planetrise. Our theme tune is by Mike Mould. We can be reached at analysingdoctorwho@gmail.com and on Twitter at analysingdw.